When a stranger buys all your pies without asking the price, he's either a fool or something far more dangerous. Clara Bennett learned that truth the hard way, standing in the scorching sun of Red Hollow with empty hands and a pocket full of questions. What followed wasn't charity. It was a calculated move that would drag her from the margins of survival into a world of ranch wars, brutal choices, and a love she never thought she deserved. This is her story, raw, unforgiving, and real. Drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this tale travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The sun beat down on Red Hollow like a punishment nobody asked for, but everyone accepted. Clara Bennett stood at the edge of the boardwalk, her hands gripping the handles of a wooden cart that had seen better decades. 5 pies sat inside, covered with checkered cloth that used to be part of a kitchen curtain. The fabric was thin now, worn translucent in places where her fingers had worried the edges during long, sleepless nights. She was 32 but looked older. The frontier did that to women. Took their softness and traded it for angles, sharp cheekbones, lean arms, eyes that didn't blink when the wind kicked dust into them. Her dress was clean but faded, the kind of clean that came from scrubbing the same garment every 3 days because it was the only one fit for town. Her son's shirt had gotten the soap and water this morning. Hers could wait. "Fresh apple pie," she called out, but her voice didn't carry. It never did anymore. A woman in a green dress passed by without looking. 2 men in work boots crossed to the other side of the street. Clara knew why. Widows were bad luck in towns like this, especially poor ones, especially ones whose husbands had died under circumstances people preferred not to discuss. Thomas Bennett had been dead 14 months, shot in a card game that went wrong, or so they said. Clara didn't believe it. Thomas was many things, a drinker, a dreamer, a man who couldn't hold money if you sewed it into his pockets. But he wasn't a card cheat. Someone had wanted him dead. She just didn't know who, and asking questions in Red Hollow was a faster way to join your spouse than grieving quietly ever was. She'd sold 3 pies all morning. 3. At 25 cents each, that was 75 cents. She needed $2 to pay what she owed the general store. Another dollar for the landlord who'd already threatened eviction twice. And her son Jamie needed shoes. Real ones, not the canvas scraps held together with hope and wire that he wore now. The heat shimmered off the dirt street. Horses stood lazy at hitching posts, tails flicking at flies. Somewhere a dog barked, then stopped. Clara repositioned the cart, trying to catch the shade from the overhang, but the sun had shifted. There was no shade. There never was. "Mrs. Bennett?" The voice came from behind her, deep, unfamiliar. Clara turned. The man was tall, not tall like the farmhands who sometimes came through town, but tall like something built for a different purpose entirely. 6'4", maybe more. Shoulders that stretched his shirt tight across the back. Dark hair, dark eyes, a jaw that looked like it had been set in stone and left there. He wore work clothes, denim and leather, dust on his boots. But there was money somewhere in the picture. You could see it in the way his belt sat, in the quality of the leather, in the silver buckle that caught the light. "Yes?" Clara's hand moved instinctively to the cart handle, protective. "I'd like to buy your pies." She blinked. "Which one?" "All of them." The words hung in the air like something solid. Clara felt her breath catch just slightly. She recovered fast. "Out here, you didn't show surprise. Surprise was weakness." "That'd be $1.25, she said, voice level, businesslike. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather fold. He counted out bills, not coins, bills, and handed them to her. $2. Clara stared at the money. "That's too much. Keep it. I don't take charity." His expression didn't change. "It's not charity. It's payment for quality. Your pie's worth less than 50 cents each?" She wanted to argue. Pride demanded it. But pride didn't feed a 7-year-old boy who'd already gone to bed hungry twice this week. "No," she said quietly. "They're worth it." "Then we're square." He took the pies, all 5 stacked carefully in his arms like they mattered, and nodded once. Not a bow, not a tip of a hat, just a single downward motion of his head that acknowledged her existence as something more than furniture. "Name's Caleb Rourke," he said. "Clara Bennett." "I know." He turned and walked away, long strides eating up the boardwalk. Clara watched him go, The $2 still warm in her hand, her heart doing something complicated in her chest that felt dangerously close to hope. She hated hope. Hope was what got you killed out here. But she took the money anyway. Jamie was waiting when she got home. Home was a generous word for the single-room shack they rented at the edge of town, but it had 4 walls and a roof that only leaked in 2 places. So by Red Hollow standards, it qualified. "Mama!" He crashed into her legs, all elbows and knees and wild energy. 7 years old, with Thomas's dark hair and Clara's gray eyes. Too thin. Always too thin no matter how much she fed him. "Easy, Wildcat." She ruffled his hair. "You break my legs, I can't bake tomorrow." "Did you sell them? Did you sell all the pies?" The excitement in his voice twisted something in her gut. No child should be that invested in whether his mother could sell baked goods. "I did." "All 5? "Every single one." Jamie whooped and spun in a circle, nearly knocking over the water bucket by the door. Clara caught it with her foot, a move born of 14 months of practice in a space too small for celebrations. "Does that mean—" Jamie's eyes went wide. "Does that mean we can—" "Shoes," Clara said. "Tomorrow we get you shoes." The look on his face was worth every degrading moment she'd spent standing in that street, every whispered insult, every turn back. She pulled him close, pressed her lips to the top of his head, and let herself feel something good for exactly 5 seconds. Then she went to count the money. $2 sat on the table. She added it to the coins in the tin she kept hidden under the floorboard. $3.40 total. Enough for shoes, enough to pay the landlord, enough to buy flour and lard and apples for another batch, enough to survive another week. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt unsettled. Caleb Rourke. She didn't know the name, didn't recognize the face. In a town the size of Red Hollow, that meant he was from somewhere else. The ranch lands, probably. There were a few big operations out past the ridge, cattle, mostly, some horses. Men who worked those ranches came to town once a month, sometimes less. They bought supplies, drank, caused trouble, left. But they didn't buy pies. Not 5 at once. Not without negotiating the price down first. Clara lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling where the lamplight made shadows dance. Jamie snored softly on his pallet in the corner, one arm flung over his head, peaceful in the way only children could be. She thought about the way Caleb had looked at her. Not through her, like most people did. Not past her, like she was an obstacle between them and something better. At her. Direct. Assessing. It made her skin prickle. Nothing in Red Hollow came without a price. Kindness, least of all. 3 days later, he came back. Clara was in the same spot, same cart, different pies. The morning had started slow. She'd sold 1 pie to a ranch hand who paid in coins so grimy she had to wash them before putting them in her pocket. Another to a woman who'd complained about the crust being too thick, then bought it anyway because her husband liked apple, and she was tired of hearing about it. When Caleb's shadow fell across the cart, Clara had been watching a tumbleweed roll past the saloon. "Mrs. Bennett!" She turned, and there he was again. Same clothes, same posture, same unreadable expression. "Mr. Rourke. Got any pies today?" 3 left. "I'll take them." This time she didn't argue about the price. He paid what she asked, 75 cents, and took the pies. But he didn't leave immediately. He stood there, holding the stack, looking at her with those dark eyes that seemed to see past the worn dress and tired face into something deeper. "You make these yourself?" he asked. "I do." "No help?" "Just me." He nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "They're good," he said. "Best I've had in 3 years." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks and hated herself for it. Compliments were manipulation. Everyone knew that. "Thank you," she said anyway, because manners were free, and she'd been raised to use them. "You do this every day?" "When I can afford the supplies." "How often is that?" The question was too personal, too direct. Clara's defenses went up like walls. "Often enough." Caleb studied her for a moment longer, then nodded again. That same single motion, acknowledgement without judgment. "See you soon, Mrs. Bennett." He left. Clara watched him go, her hands trembling just slightly, though she couldn't say why. He came back the next week, and the week after that. Always bought every pie she had, always paid without haggling, never stayed long, never asked questions that crossed lines, but his presence became a fixture. Tuesdays and Fridays, like clockwork. The town noticed. "Who's that man keeps buying from the Bennett widow?" Mrs. Harrison asked loud enough for half the street to hear. "Rourke," someone answered, "owns the Big Ridge Ranch. That operation? Thought it was failing." "Was. Heard he turned it around, bought out the Morrison place last month." Whispers followed Clara everywhere. At the well. At the general store. In the tight-lipped silences when she walked past groups of women who stopped talking the moment they saw her. She ignored it. She'd had practice ignoring things. But ignoring didn't make it disappear. One Friday, as Caleb took his usual purchase, Clara finally asked the question that had been building in her chest like steam in a kettle. "Why?" He paused, pies balanced in his arms. "Why what? Why do you keep buying from me? You can't possibly eat this many pies." A flicker of something crossed his face. Amusement, maybe. Or respect. "I've got ranch hands," he said. "They eat." "Ranch hands eat beef and beans, not apple pie twice a week." "Maybe my ranch hands are spoiled." "Mr. Rourke." "Caleb." She stopped. He was looking at her with that direct gaze again, and suddenly the street felt very small. "Caleb," she corrected, the name strange on her tongue. "I appreciate the business, truly. But if there's something else, if you want something else, I'd rather you say it plain." His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might get angry. Instead, he shifted the pies to one arm and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and held it out. Clara took it, wary. "What's this?" "A proposal." Her stomach dropped. "Mr. Rourke, I'm not—" "Business," he interrupted. "A business proposal. Read it when you get home. Think about it. No pressure either way." He tipped his head, not quite a nod, more like a goodbye, and walked away before she could respond. Clara stood there, the paper burning in her hand like a live coal, while the town watched and whispered and judged. She didn't open it until Jamie was asleep. The lamp flickered on the table, casting unsteady light across the careful script. Caleb's handwriting was surprisingly neat, measured, each letter formed with precision. "Mrs. Bennett, I have a proposition that may interest you. My ranch requires a steady supply of baked goods for the hands, bread, pies, biscuits. Store-bought doesn't satisfy. Your work does. I'm prepared to offer you a contract, 5 days a week, 12 items per day. You set the menu. I pay 50 cents per item, supplies included. That's $6 a week, guaranteed. The work would be done at the ranch. There's a kitchen in the main house that's not being used. You'd have access to equipment, ingredients, whatever you need. No cost to you. This is not charity, it's business. I need quality food. You provide it. We both benefit. Think it over. Let me know by next Friday." C. Rourke. Clara read it 3 times. $6 a week, $30 a month. More money than she'd seen in her entire marriage to Thomas. It was impossible. It was too much. It was a trap, she whispered to the empty room. Because that's what it had to be. Men like Caleb Rourke didn't hand out opportunities to struggling widows unless they wanted something in return. And whatever he wanted, it would cost more than money. She should burn the letter. Forget it ever existed. Keep selling pies on the boardwalk. Keep scraping by. Keep surviving the way she'd been surviving. But then she looked at Jamie, curled up on his pallet, and she saw the holes in his shirt, the 2 short pants, the shoes that were already wearing through again, barely a month after she'd bought them, $6 a week. She could buy him real clothes, pay the rent 3 months ahead, save something for winter when the wind came through the walls like knives and staying warm cost everything you had. She folded the letter and put it under her pillow. She didn't sleep that night. Chessum. Friday came too fast and too slow. Clara stood at her usual spot, cart empty except for 2 pies. She'd barely been able to afford supplies this week. The landlord had come early, demanding payment, and she'd given him everything she'd saved, starting over, again. When Caleb appeared, she was ready. "I read your letter," she said before he could speak. "And?" "I have questions." "Fair enough." Clara took a breath. "Why me? There are women in this town who could do the same work. Better, Probably. Women with reputations that don't make people cross the street. Caleb's expression didn't change. I don't care about reputations. I care about quality. You've got it. How do you know? You've eaten maybe 15 of my pies. That's not enough to... It's enough. His certainty rattled her. She pushed forward anyway. What happens when you decide you don't need me anymore? When you get tired of pie or find someone cheaper or... Contracts for 6 months, Caleb interrupted. Renewable if both parties agree. You want it in writing? I'll have my lawyer draw it up. Legal, binding, you walk away after 6 months if you want, no penalty. Clara stared at him. You'd really do that? Put it in writing? Already did. Got the papers at the ranch. You come out, look over the setup, sign if you're satisfied. Don't sign if you're not. Simple. Nothing about this was simple. People will talk, Clara said quietly. People always talk. They'll say let them. The words hit harder than they should have. Not dismissive, just factual. Like he'd already considered every angle and decided none of it mattered. I have a son, Clara said. He's 7. I'd need to bring him with me. I can't leave him alone in town all day. Bring him. Ranch has plenty of space. He can play, do chores if he wants, stay out of trouble. Better than being cooped up in... He stopped himself, but Clara knew what he'd been about to say. Better than being cooped up in that shack. He wasn't wrong. The kitchen, she said. You said it's not being used. Why? Something flickered across Caleb's face. Brief. Painful. Had a cook once. She left. Why? Died. The words sat between them like a stone. Clara swallowed. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was 3 years ago. Kitchen's been sitting empty since. Waste of good equipment. 3 years. The same amount of time he'd said he hadn't had a decent pie. The pieces were starting to fit together, and Clara didn't like the picture they made. Mr. Rourke, Caleb, if this is about replacing someone, it's not. Then what is it about? He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time since she'd met him, something cracked in that stone expression. Not much. Just enough to let her see the exhaustion underneath. It's about having one less thing to worry about, he said quietly. Food's a problem on a ranch. Good food's a bigger problem. You solve it, I pay you. That's all this is. Clara wanted to believe him. Wanted to so badly it scared her. I need to think about it, she said. Take until tomorrow. Come out to the ranch, see the setup, make your choice there. I'll have someone pick you up at dawn if you're willing. I can walk? It's 8 miles. I've walked farther. Caleb's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I'm sure you have. But you'll ride anyway. Save your energy for deciding. He bought the 2 pies she had left, paid double, and walked away before she could argue. Clara stood there holding the money, feeling like she'd just been maneuvered into something she couldn't quite name. She told Jamie that night. We might go to a ranch tomorrow, she said carefully, watching his face. A man offered me work. Real work. Regular pay. Jamie's eyes went wide. A ranch? With horses? Probably. And cows. Definitely cows. Can I see them? Clara felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Maybe, if I take the job. Are you going to? Honest question. Deserved an honest answer. I don't know yet, Wildcat. It's complicated. Jamie frowned, that serious expression he got when he was trying to understand adult problems. Is it because of Papa? The question hit like a fist. Clara knelt down, eye level with her son. Why would you think that? Because people say things. About him. About you. I hear them. Clara's hands tightened on his shoulders. What do they say? Jamie looked down. That Papa was bad. That you're... He stopped, young enough that he didn't have the words, but old enough to know they were cruel. Listen to me. Clara tilted his chin up. Your Papa made mistakes. So do I. So does everyone. But that doesn't mean we don't deserve chances. Understand? Jamie nodded, but his eyes were still troubled. This job, Claire continued, it's a good opportunity. Means we'd have more. Enough to stop worrying all the time. But it also means change. Big change. And I need to know you're okay with that. I'm okay with not being hungry, Jamie said, and the simple honesty of it broke her heart. Then we'll go look. Clara decided. Tomorrow. We'll see what it's like, and we'll decide together. Deal? Deal. She hugged him tight, this boy who'd grown up too fast in a world that didn't care about children or widows or anyone who couldn't fight back. Tomorrow, she'd see Caleb Rourke's ranch. Tomorrow, she'd decide if survival was worth the risk of trusting someone again. Tonight, she let herself hope. Just a little. The wagon arrived exactly at dawn. Clara had been awake for hours, dressed in her best, which wasn't saying much, with Jamie scrubbed and combed and vibrating with barely contained excitement. The driver was an older man, weathered and quiet, who introduced himself as Pete and helped them up without comment. The wagon was clean, the horses well kept. Another sign of money that Clara filed away mentally. They rode in silence through the waking town. A few early risers watched them pass. Clara felt their eyes like brands, marking her, judging her. She kept her chin up and her gaze forward. The town fell away. Open country spread out around them, scrub brush and red dirt, rocky outcrops catching the early light. The air smelled different out here. Cleaner, somehow. Less confined. Jamie plastered himself against the wagon side, pointing at everything. Look, Mama. Is that a hawk? Are those the mountains? How far away are they? Clara answered what she could, but mostly she watched the landscape change. The road climbed gradually, winding between hills that got taller as they went. After about 90 minutes, Pete pointed ahead. There. The Big Ridge Ranch spread across a valley like something out of a painting. Main house, 2 stories, white paint, actual glass windows. Barn bigger than Clara's entire shack. Corrals, outbuildings, fences that went on forever. In the distance, cattle grazed in groups that looked like moving shadows. It was massive. It was intimidating. It was so far beyond anything Clara had imagined that for a moment she forgot to breathe. Holy hell, she whispered. Jamie's eyes were the size of dinner plates. Pete guided the wagon up the main drive. Ranch hands looked up from their work, curious. A few nodded. Most just stared. Clara felt their assessment like a physical thing, weighing and measuring and finding her wanting. The wagon stopped in front of the main house. Caleb emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He wore the same work clothes as always, but here, in this context, Clara suddenly understood what she was looking at. This man owned all of this, commanded all of this, and he'd offered her, a widow selling pies from a cart, a job in the middle of it. She must have been insane to come here. Mrs. Bennett, Caleb approached, nodding to Jamie. Son. Jamie hid halfway behind Clara's skirt, suddenly shy. Caleb, Clara managed. This is Jamie. Pleased to meet you, Jamie. You like horses? Jamie peeked out, nodded. Pete, take the boy to see the foals. He can help with feeding if he wants. Jamie looked up at Clara with desperate hope. She hesitated, then nodded. Stay where Pete can see you. Touch nothing without asking first. Yes, Mama. Jamie scrambled down from the wagon and followed Pete like a puppy, already chattering questions. Clara watched him go, fighting the instinct to call him back. He'll be fine, Caleb said. Pete raised 6 kids, knows how to keep them out of trouble. Clara turned back to him. You planned that. The horses. Boys need room to run. Figured he might as well run where it's safe. It was a kindness. Clara didn't trust kindness. Show me the kitchen, she said. Caleb led her inside. The house was clean, surprisingly so for a bachelor operation. Hardwood floors, simple furniture, nothing fancy but nothing shabby either. They passed through a sitting room, a dining room with a table that could seat 12, and finally into the kitchen. Clara stopped in the doorway. It was twice the size of her entire living space. Cast iron stove, massive, 6 burners, oven big enough to roast a whole pig. Work table in the center, scarred but solid. Shelves lined with bowls, pans, utensils. A window overlooking the back pasture, letting in morning light. Everything clean, organized, waiting. Previous cook kept it neat, Caleb said. I've maintained it. Hasn't been used for anything serious in 3 years, but it's functional. You need different equipment. Tell me. I'll get it. Clara walked slowly into the space, running her hand along the work table. The wood was smooth under her palm, worn from years of use. She opened the oven, clean, checked the shelves. Everything there, organized by size and type. It was perfect. It was terrifying. "Supplies?" she asked, voice tight. Caleb opened a door she hadn't noticed. Pantry. Stocked floor to ceiling, flour, sugar, lard, dried fruit, spices, everything she could possibly need and more. "You run low on anything, let me know. I keep a standing order with suppliers in Cedarville. They deliver twice a month." Clara stared at the shelves. This is too much." "It's what you need to do the job." "I can't. I don't." She struggled for words, overwhelmed. "I work from a cart, Caleb. I make 5 pies at a time in a space the size of your pantry. This is—" "A kitchen," he interrupted. "Just a kitchen. You know how to bake. The size doesn't change that." But it did. It changed everything. Clara turned to face him, and for the first time since Thomas died, she let someone see the fear underneath. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really? No business answer, no talk about quality? Why me?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. 3 years ago, I lost someone. Not a cook. Someone who mattered. And when she died, the ranch, it stopped feeling like a home. Just became work. Endless work. I kept it running because that's what you do, but there was nothing in it anymore except obligation. He paused, looking past Clara to the window, the land beyond. "Then I came to town 6 weeks ago and saw you standing in the sun, selling pies like it was the most important thing in the world. You didn't beg, didn't apologize, just stood there offering something good and refusing to pretend it wasn't worth the price. And I thought—" He stopped, jaw working. "I thought maybe I'd forgotten what that looked like. Dignity. Real dignity. Not the kind you buy." Clara's throat was tight. "I don't need saving," she said. "I know. That's why I'm offering a job, not a rescue." Caleb met her eyes. "You want to walk away right now? I'll have Pete drive you back. No hard feelings. But if you stay, it's because you chose to. Because you saw value in the opportunity and decided to take it. Not because I forced you, not because you owe me, because it's what you want." The honesty in his voice was almost painful. Clara looked around the kitchen again, imagined herself here, working, creating, building something more than just survival. Imagine Jamie safe, fed, maybe even happy. Imagine failing, being exposed as inadequate, losing everything worse than before because she dared to reach for more. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know." "What if I can't do it? What if—" "Then you try anyway," Caleb said. "And if it doesn't work, we figure something else out. But standing still isn't an option anymore, Clara. Not for you, not for your boy." He was right. She hated that he was right. 6 months, she said slowly. "Contract. In writing. Already prepared. It's in my office. I want my own copy. You'll get one. And if something happens, if you change your mind, I want 2 weeks' notice. Time to find something else." "Fair. Same goes for you." Clara took a breath. Let it out slowly. "Okay? Okay? I'll do it. I'll take the job." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. He extended his hand. Clara shook it. His grip was firm, calloused, warm. "Welcome to Big Ridge," he said. And just like that, Clara Bennett's life changed forever. The first week at Big Ridge felt like learning to walk on someone else's legs. Clara arrived every morning before sunrise, Jamie drowsy and wrapped in a blanket beside her in the wagon Pete sent without fail. The kitchen waited in darkness, and she'd light the lamps one by one, watching shadows retreat into corners. The stove took 20 minutes to heat properly. She learned its moods. The left burner ran hot. The back right needed coaxing. The oven doors stuck if you didn't lift while you pulled. Jamie would curl up in the corner with a book Caleb had produced from somewhere, reading until the sun came up and Pete collected him for morning chores. Clara worked alone then, her hands moving through familiar motions in an unfamiliar space. Bread first, 12 loaves, kneaded and shaped and left to rise while she started on biscuits. Then pies. Then whatever Caleb had requested the night before. The ranch hands ate breakfast at 6, lunch at noon, dinner at 7. Clara cooked for 23 men, plus Caleb, plus Jamie, plus herself. 26 people, 3 meals a day. The numbers made her head spin. On the third day, she burned an entire batch of biscuits because she'd misjudged the oven temperature. She stood there staring at the charred remains, fighting tears, when Caleb walked in. "Happens," he said, not even pausing on his way to the coffee pot. "I wasted—" "You learned. Different now. Try again." He poured coffee, left a cup on her work table, and walked out. Clara stared at the coffee until it went cold, then dumped the burned biscuits and started over. The second batch came out perfect. The ranch hands didn't talk to her much at first. They'd file through the dining room, take their plates, eat in silence or low conversation that stopped when she came near. Clara didn't push. She just kept the food coming, kept it hot and plentiful, and let her work speak. On day 5, one of them, a grizzled man named Harris with a scar across his jaw, stopped on his way out. "Bread's good," he said, not looking at her. "Thank you." "Better than good. Best we've had." He left before she could respond, but the words sat warm in her chest for hours. Jamie adapted faster than she did. By the end of the first week, he knew every horse's name, could identify cattle by their markings, and had appointed himself Pete's shadow. He came back to the kitchen at lunch, filthy and grinning, chattering about fence repairs and hay deliveries and a calf that had been born that morning. "Can we stay forever, Mama?" he asked one afternoon, mouthful of bread. Clara's hand stilled on the dough she was kneading. "We're here for 6 months, Wildcat. Then we see. But what if I want to stay after? Then we talk about it when the time comes." Jamie frowned but didn't argue. He'd learned early that some questions didn't have answers yet. The town's reaction came faster than Clara expected. By the second week, the whispers had turned to confrontations. She'd gone back to Red Hollow on her one day off to settle accounts with the general store. The owner, Mr. Chen, had always been fair to her. He nodded when she walked in, took her payment, marked her ledger clear. "Heard you're working out at Big Ridge now," he said, voice neutral. "I am." "That going well?" "It is." He studied her for a moment, then nodded again. "Good. You need supplies, you let me know. I can arrange delivery if the ranch order doesn't cover it." It was such a small kindness that Clara almost broke down right there in the store. "Thank you, Mr. Chen." "You've always paid what you owe, Mrs. Bennett. That matters to me." But not everyone was Mr. Chen. Clara ran into Mrs. Harrison outside the general store. The woman's face pinched like she'd bitten into something sour. Clara Bennett, or should I say, Mrs. Rourke now. Clara's stomach went cold. "I'm working for Mr. Rourke, that's all." "Working? Is that what they're calling it these days?" Mrs. Harrison's voice carried across the street. Several people turned to look. "I'm his cook, nothing more." "A young widow, alone with a man on a ranch miles from town. What kind of cooking do you think people imagine you're doing?" The words were designed to cut, and they did. Clara felt heat rise in her face. Not embarrassment, anger. "I imagine people with too much time and too little sense imagine all sorts of things," Clara said, voice level despite the fury building in her chest. "Good day, Mrs. Harrison." She walked away, spine straight, hands trembling. Behind her, Mrs. Harrison called out something else, but Clara didn't hear it over the roaring in her ears. That night, she told Caleb about it. They were in the kitchen after dinner. The hands had cleared out, Jamie was asleep in the small room off the kitchen that Caleb had set up for him, and Clara was finishing the last of the dishes. Caleb had come in for coffee and stayed, leaning against the counter in that way he had, silent but present. "Town's talking," Clara said, scrubbing a pot harder than necessary. "I know." "Mrs. Harrison called me." She stopped, the words too ugly to repeat. "I can guess." "It's going to get worse, probably." Clara slammed the pot down. "Doesn't that bother you?" Caleb looked at her over his coffee cup. "Does it bother you?" "Of course it bothers me. I have a son, a reputation. What people think matters." "Why?" The question was so blunt it knocked the wind out of her anger. Because it just does. Because I have to live in that town. Because Jamie will grow up with people's opinions of me affecting how they treat him." "You don't live in town anymore," Caleb pointed out. "You live here, 8 miles from the nearest gossip. And Jamie's doing fine, better than fine. When's the last time you saw him this happy?" Clara opened her mouth, closed it. She couldn't remember. "People are going to think what they want regardless of what you do," Caleb continued. "You can waste energy trying to control that, or you can focus on the work. Your choice. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're calling. A widow whore taking advantage of a lonely rancher? Caleb's voice was flat. Oh, I've heard what they're saying about you, and about me, that I'm either a fool or a predator, depending on who's talking, that this whole thing is either charity or exploitation, that you're either desperate or calculating. He set down his coffee cup. None of it's true. We both know that. So why does it matter what they think? Clara stared at him, this man who seemed untouchable by the things that ate at her constantly. How do you do that? She asked quietly. Just not care. Didn't say I don't care. Said it doesn't matter. There's a difference. Caleb pushed off the counter. Get some sleep, Clara. Tomorrow's Sunday. Take the day. Take Jamie into town if you want, or stay here and rest. Either way, you're not working. The contract says 5 days. You've worked 6. Take a day. He left before she could argue. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, hands still damp from dishwater, and realized she'd started crying without noticing. She went to bed that night thinking about gossip and reputation and the price of dignity. She woke up thinking about something else entirely. Sunday morning, Jamie found her in the kitchen anyway. Mama, you said you weren't working today. I'm not working. I'm baking. That's working. This is different. This is... She paused, hands in dough. This is for us. She made cinnamon rolls. Not for the ranch hands, not for Caleb, just for herself and Jamie. She made them the way her mother had taught her, when Clara had been young enough to believe good things lasted forever. The dough rose slow and perfect. The cinnamon and sugar mixed into something that smelled like childhood. When they came out of the oven, golden and steaming, she and Jamie ate them at the work table with butter melting into the swirls. Jamie got cinnamon on his nose. Clara laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising them both. Mama, you sound happy. The observation hit harder than it should have. I guess I am, Wildcat. A little bit. Is it because of Mr. Rourke? Clara's smile faded. What makes you ask that? Jamie shrugged, focused on his roll. You smile more here. You don't look scared all the time. Out of the mouths of children. Clara reached across the table and took his sticky hand. I smile because we're safe here. Because you're eating enough and sleeping warm and getting to be a kid instead of worrying about grown-up things. That's not because of Mr. Rourke. That's because of the job. But Mr. Rourke gave you the job. He gave me an opportunity. I'm doing the work. Jamie considered this, 7-year-old logic working through the distinction. Okay, but I like him anyway. That's allowed. Do you like him? Clara pulled her hand back, suddenly uncomfortable. I respect him. He's been fair. That's not what I asked. Eat your breakfast, Wildcat. Jamie grinned, knowing he'd hit something tender, but he let it drop. That afternoon, Caleb found her reading on the porch. Jamie was off with Pete somewhere, and Clara had allowed herself an hour with a book from Caleb's library, a novel about a woman in Boston navigating society. It was absurd and escapist and exactly what she needed. Didn't figure you for romance novels, Caleb said, settling into the chair beside her. Clara closed the book. I'm full of surprises. Clearly. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the land. You staying for dinner or heading back to town? I don't live in town anymore, remember? You said so yourself. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. I meant for your day off, figured you might want to. I don't, Clara cut him off. Town's got nothing for me except judgment and bad memories. I'd rather be here. With the cows. With the quiet. Caleb nodded slowly. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a while. Comfortable silence, which was new. Clara had forgotten what that felt like. Being near someone without needing to fill the space with words or explanations. Can I ask you something? Clara said finally. Go ahead. The woman you lost? The one you mentioned. Who was she? Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't shut down. My wife, Emma. Clara hadn't expected that. I'm sorry. I didn't know you'd been married. Most people don't. We weren't married long. 2 years. She got sick. Fever that wouldn't break. Doctor came out from Cedarville, did what he could. Wasn't enough. The pain in his voice was old but not healed. Clara knew that kind of pain. She's the one who used the kitchen, Clara said. Not a question. Yeah, she loved cooking. Said it made the house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. He paused. After she died, I couldn't stand being in there. Reminded me too much. So I closed it up, ate whatever the hands were eating, told myself it didn't matter. But it did. Yeah, it did. Caleb looked at her then. When I saw you in town selling those pies like your life depended on it, which it probably did, I thought maybe it was time to stop treating that kitchen like a shrine. Let it be what it was supposed to be, a place where good things get made. Clara's throat was tight. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, that's why it works. The honesty between them felt dangerous, like standing too close to a cliff edge. Thank you, Clara said quietly, for telling me. Caleb nodded, stood, and walked away before the moment could become something neither of them was ready for. The third week brought the first real test. A group of cattle buyers came through, 8 men needing to be fed and housed while they negotiated with Caleb. Clara got the news at breakfast. They'd be arriving that afternoon, staying 3 days, and expecting meals that reflected well on the ranch's prosperity. No pressure, Caleb said, but his expression told a different story. Clara spent the morning in controlled panic. She inventoried supplies, planned menus, calculated portions. The regular hands would still need feeding, plus 8 buyers, plus Caleb entertaining them. She'd be cooking for 35 people, 3 meals a day, for 3 days. It was more than she'd ever done. It was exactly what she'd signed up for. She worked until her hands ached. Bread, roasts, pies, vegetables, biscuits. The kitchen became a hurricane of flour and heat and motion. Jamie stayed out of the way, smart enough to recognize when his mother was in battle mode. The buyers arrived loud and confident, smelling of tobacco and whiskey. Clara served dinner in the main dining room. Roast beef, potatoes, 3 kinds of vegetables, fresh bread, apple pie for dessert. She stayed in the kitchen, listening to the rumble of male voices through the wall. Harris came back for seconds, then thirds. They're impressed, he told Clara, lowering his voice. One of them asked if Caleb was hiring out his cook for events. Clara's hands paused on the serving spoon. What did Mr. Rourke say? Said you weren't available, that you were essential operations. Harris grinned. Never seen the boss protective over staff before. Hell, half the time he barely remembers our names. He left before Clara could process that information. The 3 days blurred together. Clara cooked until she couldn't feel her feet, until her back screamed and her hands moved on pure muscle memory. She made breakfasts that could fuel a full day's work, lunches that kept men sharp through afternoon negotiations, dinners that made buyers linger at the table, reluctant to leave. On the final night, Caleb came into the kitchen after everyone had cleared out. Clara was slumped at the work table, too exhausted to move. They signed, he said. Clara looked up. What? The buyers. They signed the contracts. Best price I've gotten in 4 years. He set something on the table. An envelope. Your bonus. I don't need a bonus. We had a contract. Contract says I pay for quality work. This exceeded quality. Take the bonus, Clara. She was too tired to argue. She opened the envelope. $50. Caleb, this is what you earned. Those men didn't just buy cattle today. They bought into the image of this ranch as something successful, something worth investing in. You created that image. You made them believe it. He paused. You made me believe it. Clara stared at the money, then at him. I just cooked dinner. You did a hell of a lot more than that. He left her alone with the envelope in the quiet kitchen and the slow understanding that she'd just proven something, not to Caleb, not to the buyers, to herself. The 4th week, the ranch hand started talking to her. It began small. A good morning here, a compliment there, then questions about the menu, requests for specific dishes, conversations that lasted more than 30 seconds. A young hand named Tommy asked if she could make his mother's stew recipe. Clara said yes, got the recipe, made it. Tommy cried when he tasted it. An older man named Dutch requested German potato pancakes. Clara had never made them before. She tried anyway, failed twice, succeeded on the 3rd attempt. Dutch pronounced them better than his grandmother's, which Clara knew was a lie, but appreciated anyway. Harris started lingering after meals, helping clear plates even though it wasn't his job. You don't have to do that, Clara told him one evening. I know, but seems wrong. You cooking all day and then cleaning up alone. He stacked plates efficiently. Besides, gives me an excuse to steal extra pie. Clara laughed despite herself. You could just ask. Where's the fun in that? It became a pattern. Harris helped clean up, stealing food, and telling stories about the ranch's history. Clara learned that Big Ridge had almost gone under twice before Caleb took over. That Caleb had rebuilt it from near bankruptcy through sheer stubborn refusal to fail. That the hands respected him because he worked harder than any of them and never asked them to do something he wouldn't do himself. He's a good man, Harris said one night. Doesn't show it obvious, but it's there. You just gotta look past the stone face. Clara thought about that later, lying in her small room with Jamie asleep in the next bed. She thought about the way Caleb always had coffee waiting for her in the mornings. The way he'd set up Jamie's room without being asked. The way he defended her to the buyers, called her essential. She thought about the way her heart had started doing complicated things when he walked into a room. And she thought about how dangerous that was. By the 5th week, Clara had a routine. Up at 4:30. Light the lamps, start the stove, put coffee on. Bread first, then breakfast for the hands. Jamie would wake around 5:30, help set the dining room. Pete would collect him at 6:15. Clara would work straight through until lunch, then again until dinner, then clean up and prep for the next day. She usually finished around 8. Most nights she was too exhausted to do anything except collapse into bed. But some nights, the good nights, she'd sit on the kitchen porch with a cup of tea and watch the sun set over the ridge. Caleb found her there one evening. Mind company? Clara shook her head. He settled into the other chair silent. You ever regret it? Clara asked after a while. Regret what? This, all of it. The ranch, the responsibility, being tied to one place. Caleb considered the question. Sometimes, usually around 3 a.m. when something's gone wrong and I'm trying to fix it before the hands wake up. But then morning comes and I remember why I'm doing it. Why are you doing it? Because someone has to. Because this land deserves better than neglect. Because building something matters more than just existing. He glanced at her. Why do you ask? You regretting it? No. Maybe. I don't know. Clara pulled her shawl tighter. It's just different. Being here. Having stability. I keep waiting for it to fall apart. It might. The honesty startled her. That's not reassuring. Wasn't trying to be reassuring. Was trying to be honest. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Nothing's guaranteed, Clara. Ranch could fail, drought could hit, cattle could get sick. I could die tomorrow and leave this whole thing in chaos. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Easy to say when you're used to risk. And you're not? You walked away from everything you knew to take a job from a stranger on a ranch 8 miles from town. You're cooking for 24 people you'd never met 6 weeks ago. You're raising a kid alone in a world that doesn't make it easy. Tell me that's not risk. Clara opened her mouth, closed it. He had a point. I guess I never thought of it that way. Maybe you should start. They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Charged with something Clara couldn't quite name and wasn't sure she wanted to. I should get to bed, she said, standing. Early morning tomorrow. Always is. Clara paused at the door. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for this. All of it. You're the one doing the work. But you gave me the chance. Caleb met her eyes, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Good night, Clara. Good night. She went to bed that night thinking about risk and reward and the way Caleb's voice softened when he said her name. She told herself it meant nothing. She knew she was lying. The 6th week brought trouble in the form of a supply shortage. One of the regular deliveries from Cedarville didn't show. Then another. By midweek, Clara was rationing flour and sugar, stretching ingredients in ways that made the food less impressive but kept everyone fed. What's going on? She asked Caleb when he came in for coffee. His expression was grim. Trouble with the supplier. They're claiming the ranch hasn't paid, which is a damn lie. I've got receipts going back 6 months, but they won't release another order until it's settled. What does that mean for us? Means I'm going to Cedarville tomorrow to settle it in person. Means you need to make do with what we have until I get back. How long will you be gone? 2 days? Maybe 3? Clara's stomach sank. 3 days? Harris is in charge while I'm gone. Anything happens, you go to him. Caleb left the next morning before dawn. Clara watched from the kitchen window as he rode out, tall in the saddle, heading toward problems she didn't fully understand. The first day without him felt wrong. The ranch ran smoothly, the hands knew their jobs, but there was an absence that went beyond just missing a person. It was like the center of something had shifted. Clara pushed through it. She stretched the remaining supplies, made bread with less flour, pies with more apples and less sugar. The food was still good, just less abundant. The second day, things started falling apart. A fence broke in the south pasture. 3 calves got out. By the time the hands rounded them up, half the day was gone and tempers were running hot. Then the well pump jammed. Then a storm rolled in, not huge but mean, and flooded the equipment shed. Harris handled it all with the calm efficiency of someone who dealt with worse, but Clara could see the strain in his face at dinner. "We'll manage," he told her when she asked if there was anything she could do. "Just keep the food coming. Hungry men make bad decisions." Clara kept the food coming. On the third day, Caleb returned with 2 wagons full of supplies and a fury in his eyes that made strong men step back. "Got it sorted," was all he said when Clara asked. The supplies were unloaded, the pantry restocked, and life returned to normal. Except Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The ranch had survived without Caleb, but barely. And she'd realized, somewhere in those 3 days of watching everything teeter on the edge, that she'd stopped thinking of this as temporary. She'd started thinking of it as hers. That night, after everyone had eaten and the kitchen was clean, Clara found Caleb in the barn. He was checking on a horse that had thrown a shoe that morning, his hands gentle on the animal's leg. "You okay?" Clara asked. Caleb looked up, surprised. "Should be asking you that. Heard things got rough while I was gone." "We managed." "Harris said you kept everyone fed on half supplies." "That's more than managing." Clara leaned against the stall door. "What happened in Cedarville?" Caleb's expression darkened. "Someone's been intercepting payments, pocketing the money and telling suppliers we're delinquent. Took me 2 days to track down who and get it straightened out." "Did you find them?" "Yeah." "What did you do?" "Had a conversation." The way he said it made Clara think the conversation had involved more than words. "Won't be a problem again." Clara studied his face, the hard line of his jaw, the exhaustion around his eyes, the set of his shoulders that said he was carrying weight she couldn't see. "You can't do everything yourself," she said quietly. "Someone has to." "No, someone has to lead. That's different from doing it all alone." Caleb straightened, meeting her gaze. "What are you saying?" I'm saying maybe it's okay to trust people, to let them help carry things, to stop acting like asking for help is weakness." "That what you think I'm doing? Isn't it?" The question hung between them. Caleb looked away first. "Maybe," he admitted. "Hard to break old habits." "Tell me about it." They stood in silence, 2 people who'd spent too long alone slowly learning what it meant to not be. "Clara," Caleb started. "Don't!" Clara held up a hand. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. Not yet. This job, this place, it's working. Let's not complicate it." "And if it's already complicated?" Clara felt her heart skip. "Then we pretend it's not. For now. Until the 6 months are up and we can think clearly without—" She gestured helplessly. "Without all this." Caleb nodded slowly. 6 months. 6 months. And then? Then we see where we are. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even really an answer. But it was enough. Clara walked back to the house, Caleb's eyes on her the whole way, and wondered when exactly she'd stopped being afraid of what came next and started being afraid of what she wanted. The morning started wrong. Clara knew it the moment she stepped into the kitchen and found 3 of the storage bins nearly empty. Flour down to the bottom layer. Sugar almost gone. The lard she'd been rationing had maybe 2 days left in it, and that was if she stretched it thin enough to see through. She'd miscalculated. Somewhere in the chaos of the last few weeks, the buyers, the supply shortage, the normal daily grind of feeding 24 men, she'd lost track of inventory. Now she was staring at the reality of running out with no delivery scheduled for another week. "Problem?" Clara jumped. Caleb stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, reading her face the way he read weather patterns. "We're low on supplies." "How low?" 3 days, maybe 4 if I get creative." Caleb frowned. "Delivery's not until next Wednesday." "I know." He set down his coffee, moved to the pantry, and did his own assessment. His jaw tightened with each bin he checked. This is bad. I'm aware. Clara heard the defensive edge in her voice and hated it. I should have noticed sooner. I'm sorry. Not looking for apologies, looking for solutions. Caleb turned to face her. Can you make do with what's here? For the hands, maybe. But it won't be good. Bread'll be thin, meals will be basic, no variety. They'll survive basic. That's not the point. Clara's hands clenched. You brought me here to provide quality, to make this place feel like something more than just a work camp. Basic defeats the purpose. Caleb studied her for a long moment. You got an alternative? The idea had been forming in the back of Clara's mind since she'd opened those bins. Risky. Possibly insane. But maybe the only option that didn't end with her failing at the one thing she'd been hired to do. The other ranches, she said slowly. Morrison's place, the Diamond Creek outfit, even the smaller operations past the ridge. They've got hands to feed too, right? Yeah, so? So they're probably dealing with the same supply issues we are. Same unreliable deliveries, same shortages. What if... She paused, working through the logistics even as she spoke. What if I could provide for them too? Caleb's eyebrows rose. You want to cook for other ranches? Not full-time, but enough to supplement. I make extra bread, extra pies, biscuits, whatever I can manage. You deliver to the other operations, charge them fair price. We use that money to buy supplies directly from Cedarville instead of waiting for scheduled deliveries. Cut out the middleman who's been causing problems. That's a hell of a lot more work. I can handle it. Clara. I can handle it, she repeated, stronger. But I'll need help. Another set of hands in the kitchen, someone to prep ingredients, clean as I go. And I'll need you to make the connections, negotiate prices, handle the business end. Caleb was quiet, thinking. Clara could see him working through angles, looking for flaws in the plan. Morrison hates me, he said finally. Has for years. He won't buy from Big Ridge out of spite. Then we don't tell him it's from Big Ridge. We tell him it's from me. Claire's Kitchen or Bennett's Bakery or whatever sounds least connected to you. That's dishonest. That's strategic. Once he tastes the food and realizes it's worth paying for, the source won't matter as much. Caleb's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You've thought about this. I've had 20 minutes, but yeah, I've thought about it. And if it fails, if the other ranches don't bite, or the quality suffers because you're spread too thin, then we're exactly where we are now, Clara interrupted. Low on supplies and scrambling. At least this way we tried something. Caleb looked at her, really looked, the way he had that first day in Red Hollow when he'd bought all her pies. Like he was seeing past the surface to something underneath. You're gambling, he said. We're both gambling. Have been since you offered me this job. Fair point. Caleb picked up his coffee, took a drink, grimaced because it had gone cold. I'll talk to the neighboring operations today. Feel them out. You figure out what you can realistically produce with current supplies. We'll meet tonight, run numbers, see if this is remotely viable. And if it is, then we bet everything on your skill and see what happens. Clara felt something fierce and bright kindle in her chest. Not quite hope. Something harder. Determination. I won't let you down. Never thought you would. He left her alone with the nearly empty bins and the massive weight of what she'd just committed to. Clara took a breath, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. By noon, she had a plan. By evening, she had numbers. When Caleb came to the kitchen after dinner, she was ready. Diamond Creek's interested, he said without preamble. Their cook quit last month, and they've been making do with whatever the hands can throw together. They'll take 20 loaves of bread a week, as many biscuits as you can spare. Clara's pulse quickened. Price? 60 cents a loaf, 30 cents for a dozen biscuits. She did the math fast. That's $12 a week just from bread. Morrison's foreman is who I talked to. Old guy named Carl. He's the one actually running things while Morrison drinks himself into an early grave. Carl says if the food's good, he'll take it. Won't commit to amounts until he sees quality. I can do a sample run. 2 loaves, 2 dozen biscuits, a pie. When? Tomorrow. I'll have it ready by afternoon. Caleb pulled out a chair, sat, looked tired in a way Clara was learning to recognize. This is a lot, Clara. More than what we agreed to. The contract says I provide quality food for the ranch. Doesn't specify which ranch. You know that's not what I meant. Clara sat across from him. I know, but Caleb, this could work, really work. Not just as a patch for our current problem, but as a whole separate income stream. Other ranches need what I can provide. We've got the kitchen, the equipment, the setup. Why not use it? Because if you burn out, we lose everything. The regular hands still need feeding. Jamie still needs his mother functional. I still need... He stopped. What? Clara asked quietly. I still need you here. Not collapsed from exhaustion or resenting me for pushing too hard. The admission hung between them, more honest than either was comfortable with. I'm not fragile, Clara said. I know what I can handle. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've been running on fumes for weeks. You think I don't notice you're up before dawn and working past dark? That you skip meals to make sure everyone else eats first? That you're losing weight you don't have to lose? Clara looked away, caught. I'm fine. You're not. And adding more work won't make you finer. Then help me. Clara met his eyes. You said I'd need another set of hands. Find them. Hire someone to assist in the kitchen. Pay them from my cut if you have to, but give me the support to make this work. Caleb was silent for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. There's a girl in town, Annie Chen, Mr. Chen's niece. She's 16, strong, needs work. I'll talk to her father tomorrow. Can she cook? Can she take direction? Yes. Then I'll teach her what she needs to know. Caleb stood, paused, put a hand on Clara's shoulder. The touch was brief but warm. Don't make me regret this. I won't. After he left, Clara sat alone in the kitchen and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd just taken on. It was enormous. It was terrifying. It was exactly what she needed. Annie Chen arrived 3 days later, small and quiet and terrified. Clara took one look at the girl's wide eyes and trembling hands and softened her approach. You ever worked in a kitchen before? At home, helping my mother. That's good. That's a start. Clara handed her an apron. First rule, nothing in this kitchen will hurt you if you respect it. The stove is hot, the knives are sharp, the schedule is tight. You pay attention, you'll be fine. Understand? Annie nodded, tying the apron with shaking fingers. Second rule, I don't expect perfection. I expect effort. You try, you learn, you get better. Make a mistake, we fix it. Don't make the same mistake twice. Yes, ma'am. Clara, call me Clara. They started simple. Washing vegetables, measuring flour, learning the layout of the kitchen and where everything lived. Annie was quick, Clara noticed. Nervous, but quick. By the end of the first day, she could prep ingredients without constant supervision. By the end of the first week, she could handle basic baking. You're good at this, Clara told her one afternoon while they worked side by side on a batch of biscuits. Annie ducked her head, pleased. My mother says I have gentle hands. She's right. That matters more than you'd think. With Annie handling prep work and cleanup, Clara found breathing room she hadn't had in weeks. She could focus on the complex dishes, the things that required skill and attention. She could experiment again, try new recipes, push beyond basic sustenance into something closer to art. The sample delivery to Morrison's ranch went out on Tuesday. Caleb took it himself, wouldn't let Clara come. Carl knows me. He doesn't know you. Better I handle the first contact. Clara paced the kitchen for 3 hours until he returned. Well, she demanded the moment he walked in. Caleb set a leather pouch on the table. It jingled with coins. Carl wants 40 loaves a week, 20 dozen biscuits, as many pies as you can spare. Says it's the best food his men have had in 6 months, and if you can keep it consistent, he'll pay premium. Clara stared at the pouch. How much? $30 a week. Her knees actually went weak. She grabbed the table for support. 30, Caleb, that's more than I expected too. Apparently Morrison's been losing hands to other ranches because the food was so bad. Carl figures good meals are cheaper than constant turnover. Clara did the math in her head. Diamond Creek's $12. Morrison's $30. Her regular salary of $6 per week. That was $48 weekly, nearly $200 a month. It was impossible. It was real. I need to expand, she said, mind already racing. Need more oven space, more work surfaces. The current setup can't handle this volume. Already thought of that. There's an old smokehouse behind the main barn. Hasn't been used in years, but the structure's sound. We convert it, add equipment, you'd have double the space. That'll cost money. We've got money coming in now. Investment in infrastructure is smart business. Clara looked at him, this man who kept finding ways to say yes when she expected no. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because it makes sense." "Caleb, because I believe in what you're building here," he said, more honest. "Because watching you work is like watching someone come alive. Because Jamie laughs now, real laughs, and you smile when you think no one's looking. Because this ranch feels different with you in it, and I'm selfish enough to want that to continue." The words landed like physical things. Clara felt heat rise in her face. "That's not... We agreed not to..." "I'm not talking about us," Caleb interrupted, though his eyes said otherwise. "I'm talking about the work, the food, the business opportunity. Everything else can wait until the 6 months are up, like you said." 3 months down, 3 to go. It felt like forever and no time at all. "Okay," Clara managed. "Okay, let's do this." The next 2 weeks were controlled chaos. Caleb hired 2 ranch hands to convert the smokehouse while keeping their regular work running. Clara and Annie worked dawn to dark, establishing production rhythms, testing recipes at scale, learning what could be made in bulk and what couldn't. Jamie helped where he could, mostly staying out of the way but occasionally useful for small tasks. He'd grown in the past 3 months, taller, sturdier, more confident. Clara barely recognized the scared, quiet boy who'd clung to her skirts in Red Hollow. The converted smokehouse was ready by the end of the second week. 2 ovens, long work tables, storage shelves, even a hand pump for water so they didn't have to carry buckets from the main house. Caleb had thought of everything. "It's perfect," Clara said, walking through the space. "It's functional. Perfect's a stretch. For me, it's perfect." They stood in the doorway, looking at what they'd built together. Not just the building, but everything it represented. Partnership, trust, possibility. "First big production run is tomorrow," Caleb said. "You ready?" Clara thought about the orders stacked up. Diamond Creek, Morrison's. 2 smaller ranches that had heard about the food and wanted to try it. The regular Big Ridge hands who still needed 3 meals a day. It was too much for one person, maybe too much for 2. But Annie was proving reliable. The systems were in place. The supplies were stocked. "I'm ready." The first run almost broke her. Up at 3 in the morning. Bread dough mixed and rising while she started biscuits. Annie arrived at 4, bleary-eyed but willing. They worked in tandem, Clara calling instructions, Annie executing. The ovens ran constant. The kitchen became an inferno. By noon they'd produced 60 loaves of bread, 80 dozen biscuits, and 12 pies. Clara's hands were raw, her back screaming, her vision blurry from exhaustion and heat. But the orders were filled. Caleb loaded everything into wagons, organized the delivery routes, had it all distributed by evening. Money came back. Real money. Counted and sorted and undeniable. "We did it," Annie whispered, staring at the empty kitchen like she couldn't quite believe it. "We did," Clara agreed. They did it again the next day, and the next. By the end of the week, they'd established a rhythm brutal enough to maintain but efficient enough to survive. Word spread faster than Clara expected. By the 4th week of expanded operations, she had 7 ranches requesting regular deliveries. By the 6th week, she had 12. "You need to stop taking orders," Caleb told her one night. "You're at capacity." "We can handle more if..." "No." His voice was firm. "Clara, look at yourself. You've lost 10 pounds. You're running on coffee and stubbornness. Annie's about to collapse. This stops before someone gets hurt." Clara wanted to argue. But he was right. She could feel it in her bones, the way exhaustion had become her baseline, the way her hands shook even when she wasn't working. "We need more help," she said finally. "Agreed. I'll find it." He brought in 2 more girls from town. Sarah and Beth, sisters, 18 and 20, good workers, quick learners. With 4 people in the kitchen, the load became manageable again. But manageable wasn't the same as easy. Clara still worked 12-hour days, still supervised every batch, every recipe, every delivery. The quality had to be perfect. One bad loaf could destroy the reputation she'd built. One burned pie could cost them a contract. The pressure was constant, and then everything fell apart at once. It started with a late delivery from Cedarville. The supplier, trying to make up for past failures, had rushed an order and mixed up labels. What should have been flour turned out to be sawdust. What should have been sugar was salt. Clara didn't discover the switch until she'd already mixed 3 batches of dough. "Throw it out," she told Annie, trying to stay calm. All of it. Start over. They started over. But the lost time meant falling behind on the day's production. Behind on Diamond Creek's order. Behind on Morrison's. Then one of the ovens broke, just stopped heating, right in the middle of baking 40 loaves. "Get Caleb," Clara snapped at Sarah. Caleb came, looked at the oven, swore. "Parts busted. Need to order a replacement." "How long?" "Week, maybe 2. Clara felt panic rising. "We have orders due tomorrow." "Then we figure something out." They figured it out by running the one working oven constantly, rotating batches, working through the night. Clara sent the girls home at midnight and kept going alone. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory carrying her when her brain was too tired to think. She was pulling the last batch of bread when Caleb found her at 4 in the morning. "Clara." She didn't turn around. "Almost done." "Clara, stop." "Can't stop. Have to finish." His hands closed on her shoulders, gentle but firm, turning her around. Clara tried to focus on his face, but the exhaustion was making everything blur. "This isn't sustainable," Caleb said quietly. "It's fine. I'm fine." "You're not. Look at me." She looked, saw the concern in his eyes, the fear underneath. "I can't lose you to this," he said. "Not like—" He stopped, but Clara understood. "Not like Emma. Not to work that demanded everything and gave back only exhaustion and early graves." "What do you want me to do?" Clara asked, and hated how her voice broke. "We have contracts, people depending on us. I can't just stop." "No, but you can delegate. You can let other people carry some of this. You can trust that the world won't fall apart if you're not controlling every single detail." "I don't know how to do that." "Then learn. Because this version, working yourself to death to prove something, it ends badly. Every time." Clara leaned against him without meaning to. Just let herself rest against his chest for 5 seconds. He was solid, warm, real. "I'm scared," she whispered. "If I ease up, if the quality drops, if we lose contracts, then we lose them. And we rebuild. But we do it together, not with you carrying everything alone." Together. The word felt foreign and comforting at the same time. "Okay," Clara said finally. "Okay. Tomorrow we reorganize. Assign specific tasks. Let the girls handle more. I'll supervise instead of doing everything myself." "Good. But tonight you sleep. I'll handle the last of this." "Caleb, you don't know how—" "I can follow directions. You wrote everything down, remember? Systems and processes. I'll manage." Clara was too tired to argue. She stumbled to her room, fell onto the bed still dressed, and was asleep before her head fully hit the pillow. She woke 8 hours later to voices in the kitchen. Panic hit first. She'd overslept, there was work to do, orders to fill, but when she rushed out, she found everything running smoothly. Annie at one station, mixing dough, Sarah and Beth at another, shaping biscuits, and Caleb, covered in flour, pulling bread from the oven with the concentration of someone attempting surgery. "You're awake," Annie said, looking relieved. "Mr. Rourke said to let you sleep." "What time is it?" "Almost noon." Clara stared. She'd lost an entire morning. "The orders are on schedule," Caleb interrupted, setting down the bread. "Turns out your written instructions are pretty clear. We've been following them. No disasters yet." Clara looked around the kitchen. Everything running, everyone working, the world continuing without her direct involvement. It should have felt like failure. Instead, it felt like relief. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just eat." Caleb pushed a plate toward her. "Fresh bread, butter, preserves. And then join us. We could use your expertise on the pie crusts. Beth's struggling." Clara ate. Then she worked, but differently. Supervising, teaching, guiding instead of doing everything herself. By evening, all the orders were filled. Quality intact. No disasters. "See?" Caleb said as they cleaned up. "Delegation. I hate that you were right. Get used to it. Happens more than you'd think." Clara threw a towel at him. He caught it, grinning. Jamie appeared in the doorway, dirty from a day helping Pete. "Mama, are we staying for supper?" Clara looked at Caleb. He looked back. "Yeah, Wildcat," she said. "We're staying." That night, eating with the ranch hands in the dining room she'd served for months but never joined, Clara felt something shift. She wasn't just the cook anymore. She was part of this place, part of this strange, rough, imperfect family they'd all built together. And when Caleb caught her eye across the table and smiled, really smiled, not that half expression he usually gave, Clara felt her heart do something dangerous. 3 months left on the contract. 3 months to keep pretending this was just business. Clara was starting to think 3 months might not be enough time to protect herself from what she was feeling. Or maybe it was already too late. The money changed things. Not all at once. Not in obvious ways. But Clara started noticing it in small details that accumulated like snow on a rooftop. Barely visible at first, then suddenly impossible to ignore. She had savings now. Real savings. Hidden in a metal box under her floorboard that clinked when she moved it. Enough to survive a year if everything fell apart tomorrow. Enough to buy Jamie new clothes without calculating the cost of flowers she'd sacrifice. Enough to stop living one disaster away from complete ruin. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like pressure. The kitchen operations had stabilized after that brutal night when Caleb had forced her to delegate. Annie ran the bread production with barely any oversight. Sarah handled biscuits. Beth had discovered a talent for pie crust that actually rivaled Clara's own. The machine ran smoothly enough that Clara could focus on quality control and developing new recipes for the growing client list. 14 ranches now. 14 separate operations depending on her consistency, her skill, her ability to deliver exactly what she promised every single time. The respect came with the success. Ranch hands who'd once looked through her now nodded when she passed. The girls who worked for her talked about the kitchen with pride. Even in town, on the rare occasions Clara went back, people's attitudes had shifted. Not warmth, exactly, but acknowledgement. She was no longer just the widow selling pies from a cart. She was the woman running the biggest food operation in 3 counties. Morrison himself had shown up one afternoon, drunk and belligerent, demanding to know why his foreman was spending so much on some woman's cooking. Caleb had handled it. Clara didn't know how, didn't ask. But Morrison left and the orders kept coming. That told her everything she needed to know about which man actually ran that ranch. The 6-month mark approached like a storm on the horizon. Clara could feel it in every interaction with Caleb, every accidental touch that lasted half a second too long, every conversation that veered too close to personal before one of them steered it back to business. They were good at pretending, both of them. Pretending the tension wasn't there. Pretending they didn't watch each other when they thought the other wasn't looking. Pretending the contract deadline didn't matter. But it mattered. 2 weeks before the 6 months ended, Harris cornered Clara in the kitchen after breakfast. "Need to talk to you about something." Clara looked up from the supply list she was reviewing. Harris had that expression he got when he was about to say something he thought she wouldn't want to hear. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Opposite, actually." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "There's talk among the hands about the food operation, how it's grown. And some of the boys from other ranches have been asking questions about whether you'd consider expanding beyond food." Clara frowned. "I don't understand." "There's other services ranches need, laundry, mending, basic medical care, things that usually fall on whoever's desperate enough to do them for extra pay. But what if there was an actual system, like what you've built with the kitchen, but bigger?" The idea was so unexpected, Clara had to set down her pen. "You're talking about running a full-service operation." "I'm talking about you becoming essential in ways that go beyond feeding people. Ways that make ranches run smoother, keep hands healthier and happier, reduce turnover." Harris leaned against the doorframe. "You've already proven you can manage complex operations. This would just be expanding the scope." "That's insane. I can barely manage what I'm already doing." "You're managing fine, better than fine, and you've got people who could help. Annie's sister knows nursing. Beth's mother used to do laundry for half the town. The infrastructure's there. You'd just be connecting pieces that already exist." Clara stared at him. "Why are you telling me this?" Harris's expression softened. "Because I've been on ranches my whole life, seen a lot of operations come and go. The ones that last are the ones that become indispensable. You've got a chance to make yourself indispensable to every ranch in the region. That's power, Clara. Real power. The kind that protects you." "From what?" "From whatever comes next." He left before she could ask what he meant. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the small room off the kitchen, listening to Jamie's soft breathing from the next bed and thought about power and protection and what came next. The contract ended in 2 weeks. After that, everything was negotiable. She could renew. She could walk away. She could propose new terms, or Caleb could decide he didn't need her anymore. The thought made her chest tight, not because of the money, though losing the income would hurt, but because leaving would mean taking Jamie away from the first place he'd ever been happy. Leaving would mean going back to Red Hollow or somewhere like it, starting over, rebuilding from nothing. Leaving would mean not seeing Caleb every day. That last thought scared her most of all. She was still awake when footsteps crossed the kitchen floor. Clara sat up, grabbed the shawl from the foot of her bed, and slipped out to investigate. Caleb stood at the stove, heating water for coffee. He looked surprised when she appeared. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I was already up." "Can't sleep either?" Something like that. They stood in the pre-dawn darkness, the stove providing the only light. Caleb poured water, made coffee, handed Clara a cup without asking if she wanted one. She took it, grateful for something to hold. 2 weeks, Caleb said finally. "I know." "You thought about what happens after?" Clara's heart hammered. "Some." "And?" "And I don't know yet." The lie tasted bitter. She knew exactly what she wanted. She just didn't know if saying it out loud would make it real or destroy it. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I want you to stay." The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. "As your cook?" Clara said carefully. "As whatever you want to be." Clara's breath caught. "Caleb, I'm not good at this," he interrupted. "Talking about feelings, making pretty speeches. But these last 6 months, watching you build something from nothing, watching Jamie grow, watching this ranch become something more than just work." He stopped, jaw tight. "I don't want that to end. I don't want you to end." "You mean the kitchen operation?" "I mean you, Clara, you, here, with me." The confession was so raw it hurt to hear. Clara set down her coffee cup before her shaking hands could drop it. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this. Of wanting something and losing it. Of Jamie getting attached and having it ripped away. Of building a life here and waking up one day to find out it was all temporary. What if it's not temporary? Everything's temporary. Thomas taught me that." "I'm not Thomas." "I know you're not. But that doesn't mean—" Clara struggled for words. "What if it doesn't work? What if we try and it falls apart? And then I've lost the job and the security and the one place Jamie's ever been safe?" Caleb stepped closer. Not touching, but close enough that Clara could feel the heat from his body. "What if it does work?" he asked quietly. "What if you stop waiting for disaster and let yourself have something good?" Clara looked up at him, this man who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who'd believed in her skill when she'd barely believed in herself, who'd somehow become the center of a life she hadn't known she wanted. "I don't know how," she admitted. "Then we figure it out together. Same way we figured out everything else." He was so certain, so steady. Clara wanted to believe him. "Can I have time to think?" "You can have whatever you need." But as he left the kitchen and Clara stood alone with her cooling coffee, she knew thinking wouldn't change anything. Her heart had already made the decision. Her head just needed time to stop arguing with it. The next day brought a crisis that put everything else on hold. A rider arrived mid-morning, horse-lathered and exhausted, with news from Diamond Creek. Fire in their main barn. 12 hands injured, 3 seriously. They needed medical supplies, clean bandages, food for the men fighting the blaze and caring for the wounded. Caleb was already moving before the rider finished talking. "Harris, get the medical kit. Tommy, load 2 wagons with water barrels. Pete, I'll handle food," Clara interrupted. Caleb looked at her. "You sure?" "Positive." "How many men?" 40, maybe 50 by the time neighboring ranches send help. Clara's mind raced through logistics. "Give me 2 hours." She worked faster than she'd ever worked. Annie and the girls fell into rhythm beside her, no questions asked. Bread, biscuits, dried meat, anything portable and filling. They loaded crates while Caleb organized the rest of the supplies. "I'm coming with you," Clara said as the wagons were being hitched. "Clara, it's dangerous. The fire might not be contained yet. Those men need more than just food dropped off. They need someone who knows how to set up a field kitchen, portion supplies, keep things organized in chaos." "That's me." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, looked at the determination in her face, nodded. "Jamie stays here with Pete." Agreed. The ride to Diamond Creek took 90 minutes. Clara could see smoke from miles away, a black column against the sky. As they got closer, the smell hit: burning wood, burning hay, burning flesh. Clara's stomach turned, but she kept her face neutral. The scene at Diamond Creek was controlled chaos. Men running with water buckets, others tending to injured hands, laid out on the ground. The barn still smoldering even though the main fire was out. Clara jumped from the wagon and started organizing immediately. Annie, set up a distribution point over there. Sarah, Beth, start portioning food. Each man gets bread, biscuit, meat. Keep it moving. We'll do a second round once everyone's eaten. The girls moved, Clara moved. Within 20 minutes, they had a system running. Caleb worked with his ranch owner, coordinating efforts to save what livestock they could and prevent the fire from spreading to other structures. Clara caught glimpses of him through the smoke, directing men, hauling water, working harder than anyone despite technically being a guest. By nightfall, the immediate crisis was contained. The injured were being cared for. The fire was out. Everyone was exhausted. Clara stood near the temporary kitchen area, swaying on her feet, when one of the Diamond Creek hands approached. "You're the Bennett woman. The cook." Clara nodded. "My brother works at Morrison's. He talks about your food like it's something sacred." The man paused. "What you did today, organizing all this, keeping men fed while everything was falling apart, that was more than cooking. That was leadership." Clara didn't know what to say to that. "Just wanted to thank you," the man continued, "and to say if you ever need anything, you call on Diamond Creek. We don't forget people who show up when it matters." He walked away before Clara could respond. Leadership. The word echoed in her mind. She'd been so focused on survival, on building a business, on proving her worth through work, that she hadn't noticed what she was actually becoming. Not just a cook, not just a business operator. Something more. Someone people looked to when things fell apart. The realization was dizzying. Caleb found her an hour later, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at nothing. "You okay?" "Tired. We're heading back soon. Owner here said they'll handle cleanup. We did what we could." Clara nodded, started to stand. Her legs buckled. Caleb caught her, arms solid around her waist. "When's the last time you ate?" Clara tried to remember. Couldn't. "Come on." He guided her to the wagon, made her sit, produced bread and water from somewhere. Clara ate mechanically while Caleb watched. "You were incredible today," he said quietly. "I just did what needed doing." "That's what makes it incredible." Caleb sat beside her. "Most people freeze in crisis. You ran toward it, organized it, made it manageable." "Someone had to. It didn't have to be you, but it was. That matters." Clara looked at him in the fading light, saw the respect in his eyes, the admiration, the something else he wasn't saying. "Caleb, I know, not yet. But soon, Clara. Soon we need to talk about what this is." "I know." They rode back to Big Ridge in darkness, Clara dozing against Caleb's shoulder, too exhausted to maintain the distance she'd been carefully preserving. If the other hands noticed, they didn't comment. Back at the ranch, Caleb carried her into the house when she couldn't walk on her own. "I'm fine," Clara protested weakly. "You're asleep on your feet. Stop arguing." He set her down on her bed, removed her boots, pulled a blanket over her. Clara was unconscious before he left the room. She woke 12 hours later to find the kitchen already running. Annie had taken charge, coordinating with the girls, keeping production on schedule, everything functioning without Clara's direct involvement. It should have worried her. Instead, she felt pride. She'd built something strong enough to run without her. That was success, not failure. Jamie found her at lunch, throwing himself into her arms. "Mama, Pete said there was a fire and you went to help and you didn't come back until really late and I was scared." Clara held him tight. "I'm sorry, Wildcat. I should have told you before I left. Mr. Rourke said you were being a hero. Mr. Rourke exaggerates. Do you have to do that again? Go to fires?" Clara pulled back, looked at her son's worried face. "I hope not. But if people need help and I can give it, I probably will. Because that's what we do. We help when we can." Jamie considered this. "Like how Mr. Rourke helped us." "Yeah, like that." "Okay, but next time tell me first so I don't worry." "Deal." That afternoon, riders arrived from 4 different ranches, all with the same message. They'd heard about what happened at Diamond Creek, heard about Clara's response. They wanted to hire her for emergency coordination if anything ever happened at their operations. Clara stared at the proposals, barely comprehending. "You're building something bigger than food," Harris said when she showed him the letters. "Told you. Indispensable. I don't know anything about emergency management. You know how to organize chaos. That's 90% of the job. The rest you learn as you go." Clara thought about power and protection, about becoming too valuable to discard, about creating security not through dependence but through competence. "I need to talk to Caleb." She found him in the barn, working on a saddle that needed repair. He looked up when she entered, reading something in her expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I don't even know." Clara thrust the letters at him. 4 ranches want to pay me to coordinate emergency responses. Not just food, full crisis management. Caleb read through the proposals, eyebrows rising. "This is substantial money." "I know. This is also a completely different operation than what we agreed to." "I know that too." "You want to do it?" Clara realized she did. Somewhere between the kitchen and Diamond Creek, she'd discovered she was good at this. Not just cooking, leading, organizing, making order from chaos, and people were willing to pay her for it. "I think I do, but it would mean expanding beyond the ranch, being available for other operations, potentially being gone for days at a time if something major happens. So hire someone to cover your absences. You've got Annie. She's more than capable of running kitchen operations when you're not here." "And you'd be okay with that?" "With me being gone." Caleb set down the letters. "Clara, if you'd asked me 6 months ago whether I'd be okay with any of this, I'd have said no. But you've shown me what's possible when you stop holding tight to control and let people grow into their potential. Annie's ready to run the kitchen. The girls are ready for more responsibility. And you're ready for something bigger than what Big Ridge can offer." "I'm not leaving," Clara said quickly. "Not saying you should, but you don't have to limit yourself to one ranch, one role, one definition of what you do. You can build an empire if you want. I'll support it." "Why?" "Because watching you succeed doesn't diminish me. It elevates everything around you. The ranch, the hands, Jamie, me." He paused. "Especially me." The honesty in his voice made Clara's chest tight. "The contract ends in 10 days. "I know. And I still don't know what I want after that." "That's a lie," Caleb said gently. "You know. You're just scared to say it." He was right. She was terrified. "What if I choose wrong?" "Then we deal with the consequences and choose again. Life's not one decision, Clara. It's 1,000 small choices that add up to something. You don't have to have all the answers now." Clara moved closer, until she stood directly in front of him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, the scar on his jaw she'd never asked about, the way his hands flexed like he wanted to reach for her but was holding back. "I want to stay," she said quietly. "Not just at the ranch. With you. I want to see where this goes, whatever this is. But I'm scared it'll end and I'll have lost everything." "You won't lose everything. Worst case, you lose me. And you'd survive that. You've survived worse. I don't want to just survive anymore. I want to live. Really live. And I think," her voice caught, "I think I want to live with you." Caleb's expression cracked. Relief, joy, fear, all of it visible for half a second before he got it under control. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm sure enough to try." He reached for her then, hands cupping her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I'm going to kiss you now. If that's not okay." Clara kissed him first. It was nothing like the romantic novels made it seem. Awkward and uncertain, both of them out of practice, noses bumping before they figured out the angle. But it was real. It was honest. And when they pulled apart, Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. "That was terrible," she said. "Awful," Caleb agreed. "We should probably try again, for practice." "Definitely." The second kiss was better. The third, better still. When they finally broke apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "So, you're staying?" "I'm staying." "And the contract?" "I think we need new terms. Partnership, not employment. Equal stake in the operations. Shared decision-making." Caleb pulled back, surprised. You want to be partners? In business, yes. In the rest, Clara hesitated. I think we figure that out as we go. I can work with that. They stood in the barn, holding each other, while the ranch carried on around them. Somewhere in the distance, Jamie was laughing. The kitchen operated smoothly. The hands went about their work. Everything continuing, stable, real. Clara had spent 18 months convinced that peace was impossible, that safety was a lie, that trusting anyone would lead to disaster. She'd been wrong. Standing in Caleb's arms, feeling his heartbeat steady under her palm, Clara finally understood what Harris had meant about power and protection. Real security didn't come from walls or weapons or even money. It came from building something so strong, so valuable, so essential that it couldn't be easily destroyed. She'd built that, through skill and determination and refusing to quit when everything told her to. And now she was choosing to build something else, something softer, but no less important. A life, a future, a home. I love you, she said, surprising herself with the words. Caleb's arms tightened around her. I know. I've known for months. You didn't say anything. Neither did you. Figured we'd both say it when we were ready. Clara pulled back, looked up at him. You love me too? Since the first day you walked into this kitchen and looked at it like it was treasure instead of just equipment, maybe before that. Hard to say exactly when. That's not very romantic. I'm not very romantic, but I'm honest, and I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Good enough. Better than good enough. Clara kissed him again, softer this time, and let herself believe in possibility. The contract deadline came and went without ceremony. Clara signed new papers, making her a full partner in the ranch operations. Caleb signed papers, making her kitchen business a separate entity they jointly owned. Legal, official, protected. The ranches kept ordering. The emergency coordination requests kept coming. Annie stepped up as head kitchen manager. The operation grew. And through it all, Clara and Caleb learned each other. Slowly. Carefully. Two people who'd been alone so long they'd forgotten how to be anything else. It wasn't always smooth. They argued about expansion rates and investment priorities, about Jamie's education and what roles the hands should play, about whether to take on more ranches or focus on quality over quantity. But they didn't break. They bent and adjusted and found middle ground because losing each other wasn't an option anymore. 6 months after the original contract ended, on a cool evening in early autumn, Caleb asked Clara to marry him. Not with a ring, though he'd commissioned one from a jeweler in Cedarville, but with a simple question over dinner in the kitchen where they'd first partnered. Want to make this official? In all the ways? Clara looked at Jamie, who was pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. Looked at the kitchen she'd transformed. Looked at Caleb, patient and steady, and hers. Yeah, she said. I do. They married quietly in the ranch house with the hands as witnesses, and Pete officiating because he was the only one who'd ever performed a ceremony before. Clara wore a new dress, blue instead of white, practical but pretty. Jamie stood beside her as her official supporter, solemn and proud. When Caleb kissed her as husband and wife, the hands cheered. Annie cried. Harris produced a bottle of whiskey from somewhere, and everyone toasted the new partnership. That night, lying beside Caleb in his bed that was now their bed, Clara thought about the woman who'd stood on that boardwalk in Red Hollow 18 months ago, desperate, scared, fighting just to survive one more day. That woman would barely recognize who Clara had become. Business owner, crisis coordinator, wife, mother, leader. She'd earned every piece of it. You awake? Caleb's voice rumbled in the darkness. Yeah. What are you thinking about? How far we've come. We've come far, Clara smiled. We're just getting started. And she meant it. The first winter as husband and wife tested them in ways Clara hadn't anticipated. Not the marriage itself. That part was surprisingly easy, or as easy as anything involving two stubborn people could be. But the business decisions that came with being partners, those cut deeper than romantic disagreements ever could. The issue started in late November when Caleb proposed expanding the cattle operation by purchasing land adjacent to Big Ridge. Good grazing land, water rights included, available because the previous owner had died and his children wanted nothing to do with ranching. It's a smart investment, Caleb said over breakfast. spreading a hand-drawn map across the table. Doubles our capacity, gives us room to grow the herd. Clara studied the numbers he'd written in the margins. That's a lot of money. Money we have. The kitchen operations have been profitable for 8 months straight. Emergency coordination contracts are bringing in steady income. We can afford this. Kitchen operations my business built, Clara said carefully. Money I earned. Caleb looked up, surprised. Our business? Our money. That's what partnership means. Does it? Because I don't recall discussing cattle expansion. You made this decision alone. I'm bringing it to you now. After you've already negotiated terms with the sellers, after you've done the math and decided it makes sense. You're not asking my opinion, Caleb. You're asking me to approve what you've already chosen. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. That's not fair, Caleb said finally. Isn't it? You talk about partnership, but you still run this ranch like you're the only one making decisions. The kitchen, the emergency services, those are mine. The land, the cattle, the ranch hands, those are yours. We're not partners. We're just two separate operations sharing a name. Caleb's jaw tightened. You want equal say in cattle decisions? Fine. But that means I get equal say in kitchen decisions. How much we expand, which contracts we take, who we hire, all of it. Clara felt her defenses rise. The kitchen is my expertise. You don't know, and cattle are mine. See the problem? They stared at each other across the table, both recognizing the trap they'd built without meaning to. We need new rules, Clara said finally. Real ones. Not just signatures on paper, but actual systems for making decisions together. Agreed. But I'm still buying that land, with or without your approval. Then you're buying it with ranch funds, not kitchen funds. My earnings stay separate until we figure out how to actually be partners, instead of just calling ourselves that. Caleb's expression went cold. Fine. He left the kitchen without finishing his coffee. Clara sat alone with the map, feeling sick. They didn't speak for 3 days. The ranch kept running because it had to. Clara managed the kitchen operations, Caleb handled everything else. They were polite when they had to interact, professional even, but the warmth was gone, replaced by the kind of careful distance that hurt worse than fighting. Jamie noticed, of course. Kids always did. Are you and Caleb mad at each other? He asked one evening while helping Clara clean up after dinner. We're working through a disagreement. That's grown-up talk for yes. Clara smiled despite herself. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice more now. Jamie dried a plate carefully. Is it about money? What makes you think that? Because everything's about money, even when people say it's not. He set the plate down. Are we going to have to leave? The question hit Clara like a punch to the stomach. No, Wildcat. No. This is our home. We're not leaving. But if you and Caleb can't work it out, we'll work it out. Clara knelt down, eye level with her son. Disagreeing doesn't mean quitting. It means figuring out how to do better. Understand? Jamie nodded, but his eyes were still worried. That night, Clara lay alone in the bed she'd been sharing with Caleb for 4 months and admitted to herself that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when it meant losing what she'd built. Not when it scared her son. She found Caleb in the barn, same as that first night they'd talked. Some patterns, it seemed, were hard to break. Can we talk? Caleb looked up from the tack he was mending, nodded. Clara sat on a hay bale, gathering her thoughts. I was wrong, she said. Not about needing better systems. That's still true. But I was wrong to treat the kitchen money like it was only mine. You gave me the opportunity to build that business, supported it even when it meant disruption to ranch operations. I wouldn't have any of it without you. And I was wrong to make decisions without you, Caleb said quietly. The land purchase affects both of us. I should have brought you in from the start, not after I'd already decided. So what do we do? Caleb set down the leather he'd been working. We make actual rules. Weekly meetings to discuss any decision over $100. Monthly reviews of all operations, kitchen and ranch both. Full financial transparency. And any major decision, land purchase, business expansion, hiring management, requires both of us to agree. No exceptions. Clara nodded slowly. And if we can't agree, then we keep talking until we can. Or we table it until we have more information, but we don't move forward with resentment. That kills partnerships faster than any business decision could. You sound like you've thought about this. Haven't slept much the last 3 days. Me neither. They looked at each other across the barn, two people learning that love and partnership weren't the same thing, but both required work. I bought the land, Caleb admitted. Signed papers yesterday. I'm sorry. I should have waited. Clara's first instinct was anger. She breathed through it. Show me the details. All of them. Let me understand what we're getting and what it means for our finances. Then we decide together how to move forward with it. Caleb nodded, relief visible on his face. Fair enough. And Caleb, next time you make a decision without me, I'm sleeping in the kitchen for a month. Noted. They didn't hug or kiss or make grand declarations, but they talked for 2 hours about money and land and building something that belonged to both of them. And when they finally went to bed, they went together. Progress, Clara learned, wasn't smooth, but it was possible. The land purchase ended up being brilliant. By spring, the expanded grazing area allowed Caleb to increase the herd by 40%. The additional cattle meant more contracts with buyers, more income for the ranch, more stability. Clara expanded kitchen operations too, but carefully. She opened a second location in Cedarville, staffed by women she trained personally. It became a hub for the region, fresh bread daily, orders taken for ranch deliveries, even a small dining area where townspeople could eat meals they didn't have to cook themselves. The Cedarville location did something Clara hadn't expected. It gave her visibility beyond the ranches. Town women started coming to her with questions about starting their own businesses. Widows, mostly, or wives of men who drank away their earnings. Women who needed income but had few options. Clara started teaching them. Informal classes at first, showing techniques for baking in bulk, managing supplies, setting fair prices. Then more structured lessons, basic bookkeeping, customer management, how to negotiate with suppliers. You're building a network, Harris observed one afternoon when Clara mentioned the classes. I'm helping women learn skills. You're doing both, and that network's going to be worth more than money someday. You watch. He was right, though Clara didn't realize it until the following winter when a drought hit the region hard. Water sources dried up. Grazing land turned brown and brittle. Ranches started struggling, unable to feed their cattle, unable to maintain operations. Some sold off herds at devastating losses. Others went under completely. Big Ridge survived because of the land Caleb had purchased. The water rights from that acquisition kept their cattle fed when neighboring ranches were dying. But Clara saw what was happening to the smaller operations, and it ate at her. She called a meeting with the women she'd been teaching. Some of you have husbands or fathers working ranches that are struggling. I want to help, but I need information. Which operations are in real trouble? Who's about to go under? The women talked. Clara listened. By the end of the meeting, she had a list of 5 ranches on the edge of failure. That night, she presented a proposal to Caleb. I want to use kitchen profits to buy water rights from struggling ranches, not to own them, to lease them back at rates they can afford, keep operations running through the drought. Caleb studied the numbers she'd written out. This is risky. If the drought continues, those ranches might fold anyway. We'd lose the investment. Maybe. But if they survive, we've built loyalty that money can't buy. And we've kept families from losing everything. This isn't just business for you, is it? Clara thought about standing on that boardwalk in Red Hollow, desperate and alone. No, it's not. Then we do it, but we do it smart. Contracts that protect us if things go completely wrong. And we cap the investment at 30% of kitchen profits. I won't risk everything we've built on hope. Deal. They structured the agreements carefully. 5 ranches, water rights leased back at minimal cost, contracts lasting 2 years with options to extend. It was charity dressed up as business, and everyone knew it. But pride mattered out here, so they maintained the fiction. 3 of the 5 ranches survived the drought. 2 didn't, but the families got to walk away with some dignity instead of complete ruin. And the 3 that survived remembered who'd helped when no one else would. Harris had been right about networks. By the time spring came and rain returned, Clara had built something more valuable than money. She'd built trust. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were good. Jamie grew from a boy into a young man who knew how to work with his hands and think with his head. He learned ranching from Caleb, business from Clara, and developed a knack for seeing opportunities no one else noticed. At 15, he proposed expanding into leather goods production using cattle hides from Big Ridge. At 17, he negotiated the ranch's first contract with the railroad for beef deliveries. By 19, he was running portions of the operation that would have overwhelmed most men twice his age. Clara watched her son become someone she barely recognized, confident, capable, unafraid of the world that had terrified her for so long, and felt something complicated. Pride mixed with loss. He didn't need her the way he once had. That was the point of raising children, she knew. But it hurt anyway. "He's ready to build his own life," Caleb said one evening, watching Jamie ride out with the hands. "I know. You okay with that?" Clara thought about it honestly. Getting there. The kitchen operations continued to grow. Clara's network of trained women spread across 3 counties. Some started their own businesses. Others joined existing operations, bringing skills that improved efficiency and quality. The classes Clara taught became legendary, women traveling 2 days just to learn from the widow who'd built an empire from nothing. That's how people referred to her now. The Bennett woman. The one who'd taken a cart full of pies and turned it into something that fed half the territory. Stories about her grew in the telling, becoming larger than life. Clara mostly ignored the mythology, but occasionally it worked in her favor. When she needed financing to open a 3rd location, the bank approved her application without hesitation. When she proposed a cooperative system where women could pool resources for bulk supply purchases, 30 operations signed on immediately. Her word carried weight now. Her reputation opened doors that would have been sealed shut to the desperate widow selling pies in Red Hollow. But success brought complications too. As the business grew, Clara spent more time managing and less time actually cooking. She hired managers, trained supervisors, built systems that ran without her direct involvement. It was necessary for scaling, but something got lost in the process. She was in Cedarville reviewing quarterly numbers when she realized she hadn't actually baked anything in 3 weeks. The knowledge hit her hard. That night, back at Big Ridge, Clara went to the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. She mixed dough by hand, not measuring, just feeling, kneaded until her arms burned, shaped loaves the way her mother had taught her 25 years ago. When they came out of the oven, golden and perfect, Clara sat at the work table and cried. Not from sadness, from remembering who she'd been before the business and the reputation and the network. Just a woman who loved making good food. Caleb found her there, surrounded by fresh bread and tears. "What's wrong?" "I forgot why I started this," Clara said. "It was never about building an empire. It was about survival first, then about making something good. When did it become about spreadsheets and management meetings and quarterly projections?" Caleb pulled up a chair. "When you got successful, that's what success looks like." "I hate it." "Then change it." "I can't just—" "Why not? It's your business. If you want to bake more and manage less, hire someone to handle the parts you hate. If you want to go back to smaller operations and direct customer contact, scale back. You built this thing. You can rebuild it any way you want." Clara looked at him through tears. "That easy?" "Never said it was easy. Said it was possible. Big difference." She spent the next month restructuring, promoted Annie to overall operations manager, hired an accountant to handle finances, reduced her own role to quality control and recipe development, the part she actually enjoyed. The business ran just as well. Better, actually, because the people she'd promoted were hungry to prove themselves in ways Clara no longer was. She'd already proven everything she needed to. What she wanted now was simpler. Time to bake. Time with Caleb. Time to watch Jamie build his own version of success and be proud instead of anxious. Time to actually live instead of just surviving in increasingly comfortable circumstances. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised her with a trip to San Francisco. 4 days, just the 2 of them, leaving the ranch in Jamie's capable hands. Clara had never been to a city that big. The noise, the crowds, the buildings that scraped the sky. It was overwhelming in the best way. They ate in restaurants where someone else did the cooking, slept in a hotel with sheets so fine Clara was afraid to touch them, walked through markets that sold ingredients she'd never heard of. On their last night, sitting in a restaurant overlooking the bay, Caleb asked her a question she hadn't expected. "Are you happy?" Clara set down her fork. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one. We've built something impressive. You're successful beyond what either of us imagined when this started. But are you happy?" Clara thought about it. Really thought, not just giving the answer she was supposed to give. Most days, yeah, I am. Not the way I thought happiness would feel. It's not constant or smooth or simple, but it's real. It's mine. And I worked for it. She paused. Are you? Yeah, I am. You surprise me, Clara Bennett. Still do, every day. Rourke, Clara corrected. Clara Rourke. You kept Bennett for the business. The business is different, but this, she gestured between them. This is Rourke. Ours. They held hands across the table like young lovers, instead of two people who'd fought their way to this moment through circumstances that should have broken them both. The trip back to Big Ridge felt like returning home instead of returning to work. Claire had lived enough places to know the difference. Home wasn't about walls or addresses, it was about the people waiting for you and the life you'd built together. Jamie met them at the house, bursting with news. Mama, Caleb, I got an offer from the Morrison Ranch. Carl wants to retire and he asked if I'd consider taking over as foreman. Clara's heart stopped. Morrison's ranch was 15 miles from Big Ridge. If Jamie took the position, he'd be leaving home. That's wonderful, Wildcat, she managed. I haven't said yes yet. Wanted to talk to you both first. Jamie looked between them. Is it crazy? I'm only 20. Most foremen are twice my age. Carl's smart, Caleb said. He knows talent when he sees it, and he knows Morrison himself is useless. Better to hand the reins to someone competent while he can still train them. But you've been grooming me to eventually take over Big Ridge. That's years away. I'm not ready to retire. And even when I am, there's no rule that says you have to step into my boots. You get to build your own path. Jamie turned to Clara. Mama? Clara looked at her son, tall, strong, confident, everything she'd hoped he'd become, and felt the last of her fear release its grip. You should take it, she said. You'll do great. Even though I'll be leaving? You're not leaving, you're growing. There's a difference. Jamie grinned, the expression so like Thomas for a moment that Claire's breath caught. But the resemblance was superficial. Everything else, the work ethic, the integrity, the careful way he made decisions, that was all Jamie. He'd become his own man, not a copy of anyone else. He took the position, moved to Morrison's ranch, visited Big Ridge every Sunday for dinner, a tradition he maintained even after he married a smart, sharp-tongued woman named Beth, who ran Morrison's books and took exactly zero nonsense from anyone. Clara gained a daughter-in-law she actually liked, and 3 years later, a granddaughter who had Jamie's dark hair and Beth's gray eyes and absolutely no fear of horses, dirt, or speaking her mind. Life, Clara discovered, had a way of giving you things you didn't know you needed. The businesses matured. Kitchen operations stabilized at a sustainable size, profitable but not all-consuming. The ranch thrived under Caleb's management, growing steadily without the aggressive expansion that had caused their first real fight. They were comfortable now. Not wealthy by city standards, but secure in ways that mattered. The metal box under Clara's floorboard had grown into actual bank accounts with actual balances that didn't evaporate during bad months. But the best measure of their success wasn't in the ledgers. It was in the women who came to Clara's classes and left with skills that changed their circumstances. In the ranches that survived hard years because of systems she'd helped implement. In Jamie's success and his daughter's laughter and the way Caleb still brought her coffee every morning without being asked. Success, Clara learned, wasn't about the size of what you built. It was about the lives you touched while building it. She was 62 when the investor from San Francisco made his offer. He'd heard about the Kitchen Network, how a woman with barely any formal education had built a food production and distribution system that served 40 ranches across 4 counties. He wanted to franchise it, take Clara's model, replicate it across the West, build something massive. The money he offered was staggering, more than Clara would make in 10 lifetimes of baking. She turned him down without hesitation. But why? The investor asked, genuinely confused. You could be wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. Clara thought about standing in the dust of Red Hollow, selling pies for survival, about Caleb buying all 5 without asking the price, about building something from nothing through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. I already have more than I ever dreamed of, she said. Money's just numbers. What I've built here, the relationships, the trust, the network of women helping each other, you can't franchise that. You can't replicate it. It exists because I was there, working beside them, teaching them, failing and succeeding together. Take me out of it. And you just have a business plan. There's nothing special about that. The investor left confused. Caleb, listening from the doorway, smiled. You sure about that? That was a lot of money to turn down. I'm sure. Some things aren't for sale. Most people wouldn't see it that way. Then it's a good thing I'm not most people. Caleb crossed the room, pulled her close. They'd both aged, his hair more gray than dark now, her hands marked with decades of work, but the fit was still right. No, he agreed. You're definitely not most people. They stood in the kitchen that had started everything, surrounded by equipment that Clara could now operate in her sleep, and Clara felt something settle deep in her chest. Contentment, maybe. Or satisfaction. The knowledge that she'd done exactly what she set out to do and hadn't compromised herself in the process. She'd survived. She'd built. She'd loved and been loved. She'd raised a good man and helped other women do the same. She'd proven that dignity wasn't about where you started, but about how you conducted yourself along the way. That was worth more than any investor's offer. That was worth everything. Years later, when people asked Clara about her success, she'd tell them the truth that most didn't want to hear. It wasn't about one brilliant decision or lucky break. It was about showing up every day and doing the work even when it was hard. It was about refusing to let circumstances define her worth. It was about building something good and treating people fairly and being willing to fail spectacularly in pursuit of something that mattered. But mostly, it was about understanding that strength wasn't the absence of fear. It was being terrified and doing it anyway. It was standing in the dust with empty pockets and still believing you had something valuable to offer. It was looking at impossible odds and deciding they weren't impossible enough to make you quit. Clara had learned that lesson standing on a boardwalk in Red Hollow, selling pies nobody wanted to buy. She'd carried it through every challenge that followed, building a business, managing growth, navigating marriage, raising a son, creating a legacy. The lesson never changed. The application just got more complex. On her 70th birthday, surrounded by family and friends and women whose lives she'd touched, Clara stood in the kitchen at Big Ridge and made one final batch of pies. Apple, same as the ones that had started everything. She made them by hand, refusing help, taking her time. When they came out of the oven, perfect and golden, she cut slices for everyone gathered, watched their faces as they tasted something simple, but made with care. Jamie raised his glass. To Mama, who taught me that anything's possible if you're too stubborn to quit. Everyone laughed and cheered. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Caleb squeezed her hand. You did good, Clara. Really good. She looked around the kitchen, at the equipment that had enabled her success, at the people who'd helped her build it, at the life she'd created from nothing but skill and determination and refusal to accept that poverty was her only option. Yeah, she said quietly. I did. That night, lying in bed beside Caleb, Clara thought about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. The distance between them was measured not in years but in courage. Courage to take risks, courage to trust, courage to believe she deserved more than just survival. She'd been afraid so many times along the way. Afraid of failing, of losing everything, of not being enough. But she'd done it anyway. And in the doing, she'd discovered something that changed everything. Fear was just information. It told you what mattered, what you stood to lose, where you needed to be careful. But it didn't have to stop you. You could be afraid and still move forward. You could acknowledge the risk and take it anyway. That was the real lesson. Not fearlessness, but courage. The willingness to show up even when you didn't know if you'd succeed. Clara had shown up on that boardwalk in Red Hollow with 5 pies and more fear than hope. She'd shown up at Big Ridge not knowing if she could handle the work. She'd shown up in her marriage, in her business, in every challenge that followed, even when showing up was the hardest thing she could imagine doing. And it had been enough. More than enough. She'd built an empire, yes, but more importantly, she'd built a life. One where she woke up knowing her worth wasn't tied to others' opinions. Where she could look in the mirror and see someone who'd earned her place through skill and integrity. Where she'd loved and been loved without losing herself in the process. That was success. Not the money or the reputation or the size of the operation, but the quiet knowledge that she'd taken the worst circumstances could throw at her and turn them into something good. Not perfect, never perfect, but good enough. And in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the frontier where survival was hard and dignity harder, good enough was everything. Clara closed her eyes, Caleb's breathing steady beside her, and let herself feel proud. Not arrogant, just satisfied with work well done and a life well lived. She'd started with nothing but pies and determination. She'd built something that would outlast her. And she'd proven to herself more than anyone that courage and skill could rewrite any destiny, no matter how harsh the beginning. That was the story Clara would leave behind. Not just in the businesses that bore her name or the women she'd trained, but in the simple truth that kept echoing long after she was gone. In the harshest places, when circumstances try to break you, you have a choice. You can accept the breaking, or you can bend into something stronger. Clara Bennett, later Clara Rourke, had chosen strength, and in choosing, she'd changed not just her own story, but the stories of everyone who came after. That was legacy. That was power. That was everything.